Because F9 just hit theaters, it is time to stop and rank all 10 now films in the Fast and the Furious franchise, including F9, the Fast Saga. My name is Max. Welcome to a brand new movie franchise ranking here to Max Talks Movies. My name is Max Zimberg. Please consider liking the video, guys. That's the best way to support this channel. Also, comment down below your list of the movies. If you haven't seen the F9 yet, put your list in without the movie. If you have, put F9 on there. It's my list. Let's have a fun discussion in the comment section down below. Also, please subscribe and ring the bell, guys, for notifications if you're new to Max Talks Movies. I do movie reviews, TV show reviews, movie rankings like these, a box office breakdown show, and many more types of shows. So please consider subscribing and ring the bell for notifications. Let's get started with this 10 movie ranking. Again, now there will be a spoiler warning for 9 of the movies I will do when F9 comes up on this list. It will be non-spoiler, but for the rest of the films, they will be spoiler filled. Let's get to number 10, and let's start with Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. This is easily the franchise that is pretty much meaningless to the rest of the franchise. It doesn't have, it's the third film in the franchise. Once again, does not have Vin Diesel, does not have Paul Walker. It's all new characters. And we go to Tokyo, and I think Lucas Black is a really interesting character. But for me, it's just a forgettable Fast and Furious film. Even when casual viewers look back at the Fast franchise, this movie never gets brought up. It became legitimate when Han's death, or where this fit in the Fast and Furious timeline, coincided with Han's death that happens in Furious 7, or the post-credit scene of Fast and Furious 6. Other than that, the movie just is pretty meaningless. Lucas Black and Bow Wow do come back in F9, and they have a good moment with Han in the movie. But overall, the movie is just a pretty forgettable movie. It takes place in Tokyo. It's nice to look at. It's just never one that I ever like rewatching on my list. Let's go into the next movie, guys, on this list. And coming in at number 9 is Fast and Furious. This is the 4th film in the franchise. Again, back-to-back Justin Lin picks. We'll talk about Justin Lin in a little bit as well. For me, this is easily, I said the last one was forgettable. This one for me is by far the most forgettable movie in the entire franchise. And this was supposed to, again, this was the movie that was supposed to be the first one that rejuvenated the franchise. It was really 5 that did that. But this one tried to, with, in my opinion, a pretty lackluster and boring story. They have Letty go undercover for Brian as an FBI agent. She gets killed, again in quotation marks. So we have Vin Diesel's pretty much separate on a revenge path for a lot of the movie. And him and Paul Walker are not really on the same page in the film. But once they come together, it becomes a fun little film. It's the introduction to Gal Gadot's character, Giselle. You have also the character, you know, Don is the two characters who keep popping up, Tego and Don. They're also very good in the movie as well. John Ortiz and Laz Alonso, I believe, are the main villains, if I had to make of the film, and they're very weak villains for the franchise. Even though it has pretty high stakes that Letty gets killed, the rest of the movie, it just feels forgettable to the rest of the franchise. Moving in, guys, to number 8, and that is Too Fast, Too Furious. Now, I know a lot of people, this is a really weird film in the franchise. I know people who think this is one of the best Fast and Furious films. I heard people say this is the worst Fast and Furious film. I'm kind of, I guess, in the middle. It's number 8, so it's on my bottom half for sure. This movie does have its moments. Again, Brian, for me, is the heart of the franchise. So the fact that he is the main character of the film does work. He has really good chemistry with Roman, and this is by far Roman's best movie. Tyrese's best performance in the entire franchise. Eva Mendes, Ludacris, they're all really nice additions. But the problem with this movie is that there really isn't a story per se. Again, Brian this is the direct sequel to the first one. He's still a cop, but he works with his ex-con buddy, Roman. And you don't really, the plot is so, you have no idea even what happens in the movie. Even when you keep watching it, rewatching it, still it feels like story-wise, there's nothing really happening in the movie other than fun action scenes. And some people say that's why they love the film, and some people say why they hate it. For me, it just is the biggest, where there's not any emotion. You don't really care about what's going on. You just like to see some of these characters on screen. So that's why Too Fast, Too Furious is number 8. Again, sorry I'm going so fast. There are 10 movies to talk about. Coming in number 7 is Fate of the Furious. Now, for me, this was by far the most disappointing movie of the entire franchise, in my opinion. I was really excited to see this story come to fruition with Dom going rogue and being really the villain of the movie. But when you start to watch the movie, you can feel like that story might have worked if Brian Paul Walker, sadly who passed away, was in the movie. Because when he split Dom up with the team, it just does not work. Our main good guy team is not as strong because there's no really connections with Dom, really other than Letty in the entire film. By far the best part of this entire movie is Hobbs and Shaw. This is the main reason why they got their own spin-off movie, was this movie, their chemistry, their banter, the two of the best characters in the franchise. Deckard Shaw is my favorite character of the entire franchise. It did feel like Roman has a lot of forced jokes in the film. Ramsey doesn't really have much to do, nor does Tej. Cypher has a lot more to do in this one than she does in the 9th installment. But for me, again, the film definitely goes a bit too ridiculous in the 3rd act with this submarine on ice in Russia. Another bad thing is Scott Eastwood, who I'm just not a big fan of. He's in the movie as little nobody. For some reason, he needs to be in all these big action scenes in the film. That also does not work. But for me, by far the best part of this movie is Hobbs and Shaw. They keep the film watchable at times because every time we get a scene with Dom on the plane with Cypher, it's pretty serious stuff. And a lot of the times the tones just do not clash in this movie with trying to be super serious of Dom being a villain, but also trying to have the Fast and Furious ridiculousness in it. And for me, those turns never liked. Did not like the movie in the theater. Still haven't liked it. I just rewatched this last week. I watched 5, 6, 7, 8, and then leading into 9. Let's go into the number 6 movie on the list, and that is the new installment, F9. This movie is just fine for me. There's clearly a top tier of Fast and Furious. The first 5 films I like to love, and then the bottom half are kind of meh to not good. This is kind of the meh to fine tier of the franchise. There's a lot of good things going on in the movie. There's a lot of bad storytelling going on. And just like Fate of the Furious, this film follows a very similar path of trying to be at times way too serious. And we get a lot more exposition, melodrama, Toretto family melodrama in this movie than even Fate of the Furious. And this one, you can actually feel even more than Fate of the Furious how Paul Walker is. And first of all, this film is missing Paul Walker, The Rock, and Jason Statham. And you can feel it in the movie. The team doesn't really feel as interesting because Brian is really the heart of the film, and his camaraderie with Dom, they're really on equal paths. I know it's now Dom's franchise, and I totally get that when you don't have Paul Walker anymore, sadly, here in the world. But it just feels off how Dom is just the main character. It used to be a two-way thing, and that's where the film doesn't really work. And John Cena's character, who I thought needed a lot more. Now, John Cena isn't that awful in the movie, but he has nothing to work with this character, Jacob. And most of his important scenes are performed by the young Jacob. There's so many flashback scenes, and it takes away. And John Cena, his character just doesn't do anything. You don't get how he can become this kid who just lives in Dom's shadow to just becoming a terrorist. You don't really get that transition at all. And his resolution in the film, while predictable, just came right out of left field and way too predictable and makes no sense. Again, a lot of this movie doesn't make sense. A huge disappointment as well was Cypher, played by Charlize Theron, clearly shot this film in maybe a day, maybe more than that. She has 2 scenes in a box and then 1 scene in a drone pilot scene. It was sad that she wasn't. They're clearly wanting her to be the main villain of the next, maybe even the last 2 films. But huge disappointment that she wasn't in the film enough. Han's death is explained not very well, but still, I think Ramsey had her best stuff from Ramsey. The action scenes are fun. I had a fun time in the IMAX theater. Just pretty disappointing when you look at the rest of the franchise. Moving into number 5, and that is where we're going to start with the original the Fast and Furious. I can't believe saying this, 20 years ago. The franchise is now 20 years old. And this is the first one. And when I would love to see if you guys have done this out here, is to watch this film back to back with the ninth film to see how this franchise has gone. Because really the story is street racers who are stealing DVDs, really, in this opening film. Now you get the four main cast members when you have Paul Walker, Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, and Jordana Brewster, all pretty much killing it in this movie. Now, of course, it does kind of feel like a Point Break remake, ripoff, but you have four really likable characters in their own unique subplots. The mystique of Dom being the leader of this team is really interesting. The fact that Brian is undercover but actually has feelings for Mia, who is Dom's sister. Letty gets involved. I really do have fun with this film. It really is probably the most refreshing film in the franchise now looking back 20 years, because it really is just a simple story, street racers in Los Angeles pulling crimes, not to going into space like they do in the ninth film. It's really refreshing rewatching the film when you've seen all 10 films in the franchise, because it just feels so different from what they're doing right now. Coming in at number 4 is, let me pull it up, it is Hobbs and Shaw. I really had a lot of fun in the theater, and I've seen this film now 3 times in full sit-down length. I really enjoy this film. Again, as I said, Shaw is my favorite character of the entire franchise, but The Rock is not that far behind. Hobbs and Shaw are 2 very popular, likable characters, as I said, were sadly missed in F9, and this movie just has so much fun. Also, Vanessa Kirby pretty much stands toe-to-toe really well as Shaw's sister with Hobbs and Shaw. She's right on par with them. She's funnier at times even, and she has some really fun action scenes. Maybe the best villain in the entire franchise when you have Idris Elba playing basically like Bucky, a robot. Brixton, Idris Elba chews up the scenery. One of my favorite villains of the franchise. I think possibly the best villain in the entire franchise. The problem with this movie is that this film, more than any other Fast film, you can really feel the runtime of its 2.5 hours. When I was in the theater for the first time watching it, after you get to that warehouse scene, I started like pulling up my chair, almost getting ready to go. And I forgot that they haven't even gone to Samoa yet. This movie is so long, does not need to be that long. Again, this film, all of our characters are superhuman in the film. It's quite ridiculous, and you can really, really feel the runtime. But I still had enough fun with the film, and that's why it's number 4 on this list. Coming in, guys, at number 3, all these 3 films I've watched back to back to back before F9 came out. So coming in at number 3 for me, everyone really flip-flops 2 and 3. Coming in at number 3 is Furious 7. This is definitely one of the most satisfying conclusions to the franchise, when you have Brian, who sadly, again, a huge tragedy that Paul Walker passed away in real life. And the ending of this movie is really beautiful. It's hard not to get emotional or have goosebumps or chills when you're watching this film. Every time I watch the ending of this movie, it really tugs the heartstrings. It's really emotional because, again, Paul Walker, such a great person. The character Brian is one of my favorite characters of the entire franchise, in the heart, really, of the franchise. And again, the film is interesting. It introduces Jason Statham's Deckard Shaw into the film as a really interesting villain who kills Han, which then sets everything up for the film. It's a really emotional film. It's a really fun action scenes, the jumping out of the plane scene. You have Kurt Russell also added to the film as Mr. Nobody. You have this really fun scene where Vin Diesel, drives the car off the hill with Ramsey in it, the Abu Dhabi stuff. It's a lot of fun stuff in the film. One of its biggest issues is usage of characters. Hobbs is completely sidelined after probably the best action scene of the entire film, which is a Hobbs versus Shaw fist fight, their first meeting in the franchise. It's a really fun scene, but once Hobbs jumps out of the building and saves Elena, he's in the hospital for the entire film. He really isn't in the film at all. It was a big misfire. You can also feel Hobbs not really being in the film that much. And also Ronda Rousey is not a very good actress. You can tell in this movie. Jaimin Hunso's Mose Jakande subplot really didn't work, and you can kind of see everything happen with that character. But still, overall, guys, I really did enjoy this film. It's one of the most satisfying and heartwarming films of the entire franchise. Coming in at number 2 is Fast and Furious 6. Now, a lot of people are a lot lower than I am. I love Fast and Furious 6. I think Owen Shaw is played by Luke Evans, is the most underrated villain of the entire franchise. A really interesting villain. Again, I'm not saying he's Deckard Shaw, but the way that he's manipulative of the family, the fact that he has Letty under his wing makes the film even more interesting. Once again, it's the best team that they have other than Fast Five: Giselle, Han, Tej, Roman, Hobbs, Letty, Mia, and then you have Dom and Brian, just really fun characters to watch on screen. And there's some just really fun actions. Obviously, the last plane scene, we have Dom and Hobbs going after Owen Shaw and one of his henchmen. That's a really fun action set piece. The London scene where they're chasing down Owen Shaw the first time they meet up with Owen Shaw. That's a really fun action scene as well. I just really enjoy this film a lot. And obviously the biggest one is that Letty is back in the franchise and she's a villain for a lot of movies. She shoots Dom, doesn't have any memory, and you really feel her coming back to the family by the end of the movie. Again, there's some really fun action, and the family is really brought up the best possibly in this film. And Giselle's death is really heartbreaking, even though she should have probably shot the guy who she was sacrificing herself for. But still, it's a really fun film with a really good family identity throughout the film. Mia's captured, so Brian has an incentive. It's just a really fun movie. But easily, guys, coming in number 1 for me is everyone's favorite film in the franchise, and it's not that hard. It's a pretty big stretch. It is Fast 5. This is the film that brought the franchise to life. It's a pretty forgettable franchise, really, when you go 1 through 4. Other than the first one, as you can tell, those 3 films are my bottom 3 of the franchise. And this film didn't just take itself too seriously, but it doesn't go too over the top, where you can take the melodrama seriously. You like the dialogue, you like the family aspect, but you also like a bit of ridiculousness and some fun action scenes. What helps with the film is that it takes place in Brazil, which really elevates the look of the film. Dwayne Johnson as Hobbs is introduced. He's a really fun character in the film, and this is the best team. You bring everyone from all across the films together. It's a really fun team. You have the Han and Giselle dynamic, you have the Don Tego dynamic, Vince is back from the first film, and the Brian, Dom, and Mia trio in this film is the best they've ever been in the entire franchise. And what I like about this film more than the others is that it takes a good 40 to 45 minutes of the film to even get the team together. The first act of the movie is Brian, Dom, and Mia going to Brazil, doing these jobs and figuring stuff out on their own, and then they need the team. I think a lot of the past films, the new film suffers because the teams are just always together. I like how they just needed the team in the film because you need to buy into the Dom, Brian, Mia trio a lot, and the film executes that very, very well. It's a fun, when they get the bank and they steal the money from Reyes, it's a really fun action scene. They do a little Ocean's 11. I just love this film. It's such an easy film to rewatch. Hobbs is a really interesting villain. It's the best The Rock, in my opinion, has ever acted in his whole career. It's a totally different Hobbs. If you watch this film and then back to back with Hobbs and Shaw, it's a totally different character. But the Brian, the Dom versus Hobbs fight in Dobbs in the garage in Rio, that's a really, probably one of my favorite action scenes, fight scenes, probably my favorite fight scene in the entire franchise. So I love Fast 5. So that's my ranking of the entire Fast and Furious franchise. Let me know your comments down below. Like, subscribe. I'll see you guys very, very soon.